Former Vice President Mike Pence is using his time and money on what he thinks is the most important issue, which is making sure that Trump's tax cuts for the rich remain. Brett, you can be happy. This is what you're just talking about. Pence's political advocacy group is launching a $10 million campaign to push for an extension of the Trump-era tax cuts, which are set to expire next year. They announced plans for a nationwide grassroots education campaign. The effort will include direct engagement with Capitol Hill using seminars, policy memos, and grassroots advocacy, the group said. The campaign will extend into 2025 when lawmakers will have to take action to extend the Trump-era tax cuts or allow them to lapse. Here's what Pence said about it. Advancing American Freedom is launching a campaign to defend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the largest tax cuts and tax reform in American history that let the American people keep more of their hard-earned money and returned jobs to America. The past few years of the Biden administration have shown us that you cannot spend your way out of inflation, and you will not be able to tax your way out of a spending problem. Washington has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. Our national debt is out of control, and taxing the American people more is not the solution. Now let's debunk a few of those statements. First, the idea that it helped average Americans. Households with incomes in the top 1% will receive an average tax cut of more than $60,000 in 2025 compared to an average tax cut of less than $500 for households in the bottom 60%, according to the Tax Policy Center. As a share of after-tax income, tax cuts at the top for both households in the top 1% and the top 5% are more than triple the total value of the tax cuts received for people with incomes in the bottom 60%. So how about the argument that it brought more money for the country? Trump added $8.4 trillion to the national debt, and permanently extending the Trump tax cuts would cost $4 trillion over the next decade.
The video will continue in just a moment, but first I have a message for you. TYT needs your help. Membership is vital to survival, so please go to tyt.com/team and become a member today.
We hear a lot of talk, Brett, about the national deficit and how much of a share each of us has, as if it's a household budget, but that only pertains to things like healthcare, social welfare programs, expanding social safety net programs. When it's cutting taxes for the wealthy, suddenly Republicans don't seem to care about its impact on the deficit. Do you think that Mike Pence's grassroots campaign to extend tax cuts for the wealthy will be successful?
Oh, I love it. I love that the only time it's like we're all Americans here is when it comes to a tax increase for the rich. Like it's literally the wording he uses, like taking tax money from the American people. Oh, suddenly we're all now American people. And what's funny is like this, they accuse poor people of being complainers when it comes to income tax. Then it's just like work harder. But that never comes out of their mouths when they're complaining about not being rich enough. Like the sad thing that I think we should just start telling rich people when we increase taxes on them back to, I'll remind you, the capital gains tax is still so much lower than it was under Trump. Before Trump came in, it's so much lower than it ever has been when we've had more success and more increase in the GDP. You just look at those rich people and tell them, are you sad that you're not keeping as much of your money, that you're not taking as much money home and putting it in your bank account? Then work harder, be better at business. You're telling me to be better as a worker and get a better job as a worker. Why don't you just crack the code better? Be a better business person.
Yeah, the idea that there is going to be a grassroots movement on the Hill for tax cuts for the wealthy is very funny to me as somebody who spent a decade in DC and was very frequently on the Hill for protests, seeing what grassroots movements look like when you have progressive organizations and local groups meeting, holding protests, demonstrating, marching in the streets constantly. Knowing what that looks like, and even being there for some of the bigger ones, like the Women's March, the March for Our Lives, and the many, many protests that all happened after Trump was elected and inaugurated. I'm not sure what a pro-corporate, pro-wealthy tax cut grassroots movement looks like, but I'd imagine it looks a lot like the Brooks Brothers riots. So I'm looking forward just to the optics of that. You're gonna get Matt Schlapp up there with his Brooks Brothers buddies, storming the halls of Congress, demanding tax cuts. It's really just going to look like a huge lobbying effort. And if Trump gets elected, it will be successful. But
right, yeah,
go ahead.
I just think that the grassroots version of a right of center tax revolt is one that incorporates small business owners. And by that, I mean, like, I have a boot. I have like I run a thrift store. Like I have a landscape company. Like I fix windows. I paint houses. That kind of a thing that incentivizes that, and unions, or that incentivizes that is the right wing version. The left wing version is incentivizes that behavior, your own small business and labor unions as people that are the hard work and soul of America, and then says we are all under attack by mega corporations that every time we change the tax code pretends they're on the side of the mom and pop who they just put out of business. And instead, if we focus on that kind of messaging, I think you do a lot better as a left wing tax reformer.
Members make a difference here at TYT. You help make the show happen, and we see you in the chat with your loyalty badge. Click the join button to become a member today.